Okay, so welcome to the Deuterostome lecture. So in the last unit and previous lectures, we talked about features of animals, and then we got into the group of animals we called protostomes. So I want you guys to just reflect back on what are the key criteria to identify an animal as a protostome. That's what we did in the previous unit. Now we're going to talk about animals that go under the heading, kind of that category called deuterostomes. So the big thing we're going to look for here is any animal that when they're undergoing embryological development, the anus develops before the mouth. That's the big kind of qualifier to say you're a deuterostome. So your anus develops before your mouth. That is, let me put the big star asterisk. Anus develops before your mouth. That is the big key criteria we're going to use for our deuterostome criteria. Now, the nice thing, big sigh of relief, let's de-stress a bit. There are only two main groups underneath deuterostomes. Those are going to be the echinoderms and the chordates. A lot of these are going to be animals you're familiar with. So we don't have nearly as much detail and groups to work with, etc. when we talk about deuterostomes. And again, you probably recognize a lot of these guys. This is where most people, when they focus on research and studying animals, they tend to focus mostly on chordates. And think about fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians, mammals. Those are all chordates, plus a few other goofy things in there. Echinoderms, Echinodermata, the phylum Echinodermata includes animals that all have a spiny skin. So when we talk about this group, echinoderms are the spiny-skinned animals. So it officially, let me put this up here, we'll go under phylum Echinodermata. Uh-oh, I'm off the page. We'll bring that down. And then we'll have phylum Chordata. So those will be the two phylum we're going to talk about and discuss here. So again, our first one to lead off with is phylum Echinodermata. The echinoderms, everybody is spiny skinned within this phylum. So you pick them up, you play with them, you touch them, you poke them, you prod them. They got this rough spiny skin. Within Echinodermata, we're going to drop down to 5 classes here. So we got Asteroidea, Holothroidea, Echinoidea, Crinoidea, and Ophiroidea. So again, as we get into this, look for those little subtle cues. Oidea. There's an Oidea. Oh, there's another Oidea. And you can find the others. All right, you guys know the point. Hopefully everybody picks up on it. Oidea refers to a class within the phylum Echinodermata. So, all right. So, spiny-skinned animals that all have their anus developing before their mouth. But let's take a quick look at the history. The earliest echinoderms evolve around 600 million years ago. These are going to be marine species. So we do not see terrestrial, we do not see any freshwater. These guys are all going to be marine species here. When we look at the diversity, the maximum diversity occurred about 400 million years ago. And then due to natural extinctions, mass extinctions, and other events, we see the diversity decline, and then it kind of settled out about 248 million years ago. And the 5 groups we have today, those are the ones that were present 248 million years ago. Okay, so we, again, really just kind of settled down to these 5 main groups for the last 248 million years ago. Fortunately, many of these groups are doing pretty well. Ecologically, they're pretty strong. But sad to say, that doesn't mean things can't change. So, all right, so now let's look at the big key features of the echinoderms. What makes an echinoderm? Somebody that goes in Echinodermata. One of the big features is this really, I'm going to make this a little smaller, really cool thing called a water vascular system. All right, so let me get that out. All right, so water vascular system. It's a feature found across the echinoderms. The way this works is they will have, get some more space here, they will have a structure that allows water to come into the system. So they're going to have an opening. In the starfish we have here, it's known as the madre porite. So say it like you're Spanish. It's actually Italian or Latin. That is the opening that the water goes into. The water then moves through a thing called the ring canal. So circle, a little ring. These ring canals and these structures are hard, dense structures. They're actually made up of calcium carbonate. That is a huge component for the animal, is this calcium carbonate. So they got the ring canal. The ring canal then branches out into what's called radial canals. Now, typically, there are 5 of these radial canals. We do see exceptions to the rule, but generally 5 radial canals come off of the ring. The radial canals then extend out, and sticking off of the radial canals are these little things called ampulla. These are little muscular sacs. Like, think about the bulb on a pipette or an eyedropper, that squeezy thing that you squeeze to suck water in and you squeeze to spit water out. That's kind of what the ampulla are. And then extending from the ampulla will be things called tube feet. Tube feet are these little fleshy projections. They stick out and then they pull back in, stick out, pull back in. So basically, as you're squeezing the pipette, the tube foot goes out, comes back in, goes out, comes back in. That is how these animals, by and large, how these animals move, is by using these little tube feet and this water vascular system. So it's a pretty cool little system we find within the echinoderms. Again, always modifications, things like that, some variations, but we'll look for that. And we'll talk more about it as we go through the 5 different classes of echinoderms. All right. Oh, I got to increase font. All right, another big feature. Everybody in Echinodermata has an endoskeleton. So, as weird as that may seem, endoskeleton means internal. It sits underneath. Underneath fleshy skin. So if you guys ever play with a starfish, there's actually skin there. And then if you, not that I would encourage it, but if you were to peel the skin back, you got this endoskeleton, internal skeleton. Very different than when we talk about arthropods with an exoskeleton, where the external body is hard, rigid, durable skeleton. These guys, a skeleton sits underneath the skin. Now, the endoskeleton is going to be composed of calcium carbonate. So I want you guys, let me get a third one in there, to pay attention to calcium carbonate. it doesn't seem like a big deal. Like, what? Who cares? It's calcium. But as the oceans continue to acidify due to climate change and the things we're doing to the planet, calcium carbonate doesn't form as well. This creates massive structural issues for everything in the ocean that has a skeleton formed of calcium carbonate or uses calcium within its body. So think about that. All the things we talked about in protostomes, that calcium was part of their body. And now all of the echinoderms, calcium and calcium carbonate is a big part of their body. It's a huge issue. So that's why I keep coming back to calcium carbonate. I want to stress the importance of that molecule or that compound, the molecular elements, calcium, etc., and then that compound calcium carbonate. Because as we get into ecology, we're going to circle back to this. Here's yet another group that is impacted by climate change because of ocean acidification and things going on in the ocean. Okay, so we got some basic structural stuff. A couple other key things here. When we look at the development of the echinoderms or Echinodermata, the larvae have, let me, makes more sense to say have bilateral symmetry when we look at them. They're ciliated, they're free swimming, they're cruising all over. But then what's going to happen as they become adults, let me move these guys down. The adults, typos going everywhere here. All right, the adults have a pentaradial body plan. Penta means 5. So how many radial canals in the water vascular system? I heard somebody say 5, hopefully. So you got your ring. You got your 5 arms of a starfish. Typically, always exceptions. Pentaradial. Radial means it's a circular plan. Slice it this way, identical on each side. Slice it that way, identical on each side. That's the radial plan. So take the radial body plan and add 5 arms to it in general. But the weird thing again is the larvae have bilateral symmetry. Another little feature that's kind of cool with these guys is that they have these little claws, or things we call, let me move this out, pedicelaria, associated with, make sure I can spell it right, P-E-D-I-C, pedicelaria. I better put this in there. Tiny. These tiny, tiny little claws on the surface of their skin. This is a pedicelaria here. So tiny little claws, little muscles in there. The adductor, abductor are just the names of the muscles that close it, that open it. We have the same thing in our body. We have adductor, abductor muscles. But what happens is those little claws pinch. They can grab food, they can pick up debris. In the case of certain groups of Echinodermata, they'll actually use the claws to hold onto little pieces of turtle grass and algae, and they cover their bodies with the algae as a form of camouflage, and they're just holding onto it with these tiny little claws, or things we call pedicelaria. So on the surface, usually on the surface of the skin. Okay, last thing to briefly mention here will be the reproductive mode. Some of them are asexual, where they reproduce asexually. They can do regeneration. They can develop into 2 new individuals and I'll finish up sexual reproduction in the next part.